Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for returning to my channel if you're one of my subscribers. Today we're going to be making an oversized string of Christmas lights. The first thing you're going to need to do is start collecting the liter size bottles of soda. I'm going to get a little more specific about these bottles a little bit later on in the video. So, and if you don't shop in the deli like I don't ever buy anything out of the deli, but if you do, collect those cups because you're going to need them for this project. But if you don't, like me, I went ahead and had to find something to substitute those cups, and I found these cups, or these quart size cups, over in the painting section at Walmart, and they are only 94 cents. I used 2 bottles of spray paint for this project. One is black and one is a Spanish moss, I believe it is, of the Krylon. Make sure that when you pick those out that they do say that they are usable on plastic. The black primer spray paint I used actually wasn't usable on plastic, and you'll see the problem I run across a little later on, so learn from my mistakes. Using Velcro at this part of the project is going to be optional because a lot of people just use glue, and there's a reason why I didn't want to use glue and I used Velcro here, and I'll discuss it more later. So today we're going to learn from my mistakes, and I had went ahead and spray painted the inside black first, and then when I went to apply my Velcro, it ripped the Velcro right off because it wasn't a spray paint that was usable on plastic. So you can either add the Velcro on first before you spray paint it, or you can just use a hot glue, so that way it really keeps that Velcro glued down or stuck on there. The next step after you've painted the insides, we're going to go ahead and spray paint the outside green. And as my little sister Sally once said, safety first. She cracked me up when she said that. And I'm going to be working with a power drill, so I went ahead and tied my hair back and made sure I put some eye protection on. I often get comments from people when they view my mechanic videos, and they're often
saying, oh, this girl shouldn't be working on the car with her hair down, blah, blah, blah.
Often I am filming and working at 2 different times, so often you'll see my hair down in videos when that's actually not
the way I operated or worked on my vehicle.
They, I guess, are missing a little bit of the editing process to videos. Next, I'm going to drill a hole at the bottom of the container. This hole needs to be big enough to fit this little portion of the light through, this little green portion. You'll notice that the bottom of these containers aren't painted green, but they need to be painted green, so make sure you don't miss out on that little spot. This is a little piece of topware that I had that I just used for the project. I went ahead and made a hole at the bottom, and I then cut off the top of this, the rim of this, so that way I had a smaller portion, because this is going to then go into the quart containers that we had that we painted green. Also, if you have solo cups, you can use those. I use those little cups that I was just showing you, and these plastic cups like from Starbucks, any of those, you can use any of those. But if you have solo cups, that'll work. But you need to make sure you put holes in all of those containers too, or all these cups. Okay, these are the soda bottles, and I'm going to point out a few things. So when you're collecting these, you need to make sure you pay attention to the shape of these bottles. You can see the Mountain Dew and the Dr. Pepper bottles, they have the same form, whereas the Coca-Cola bottle doesn't. It has more shapes to it. Try to stay away from the ones with the Coca-Cola with those shapes. I'm not saying stay away from Coca-Cola, just that particular shape of bottle. So that's number 1. Number 2, the green colored bottles are fantastic. If you don't want to spend money and time on coloring these bottles, collect only the green ones, and you'll just have a string of green lights. Your life will be so much easier and well worth your time. But if you're anything like me, kind of nuts, you're going to push yourself through the process of coloring those bottles, and I'm going to show you why that's a problem in just a minute. So here I'm going to use the Mountain Dew bottle first, and you need to make sure you take off the label from the bottle. And so I'm going to grab a utility knife. Was my first attempt, and this part of the container is so strong that I could not cut it, and I needed to cut it a little high, so this wasn't going to work. I ended up grabbing that I had to cut tubing. It's a plumber's type of tool. You should be able to find it at your local hardware store. But I went ahead and used this to cut the tops off of the bottles. And even with that, it was pretty hard, but that worked really well compared to the utility knife. If you have a Dremel, that will work so much better. I didn't have the attachment I needed for it. I don't know what happened to it, so this is what I used. The bottles have this line here at the bottom, and I use that as a guide on where to cut when I cut around this bottle to pull the bottom off of it, because we need to cut the bottom off. I used the utility knife to start the cut, but I found it way faster and easier to just use scissors to cut it off. So if you're going to take the path I did, which was to have a multicolored string of lights, you're going to have to paint these clear bottles for your project. So here's the spray paint you're going to need. It's by Krylon, and it's a stained glass spray paint, and it's super cool, but the downside is it's quite pricey. Each can is going to run you anywhere from $10 to $24 a can, and it's going to depend on the color. The prices vary depending on the color. I ended up having to take a different route to color the bottles because this was just too much for the budget of this project. I'll get into the pricing of this project a little later. I ended up using this Gallery Glass Window Color paint. You can find this at Hobby Lobby. That's the only place I could find it at. And you may be thinking, well, I hope this is going to be easy. But I have to tell you, this is not going to be easy. It's a pretty big pain to paint these bottles, and I found that sometimes you get brush strokes when you're painting, and if you do end up doing that and getting those brush strokes, just put a little bit of water on your brush and it'll help smooth it out. This was the alternative route I had to take, but if you can afford to spend that kind of money on those spray paints, definitely buy them. It's going to make this project so much easier and you'll be able to complete it so much faster. Next tip is to use a hair dryer to dry the paint between each coat. For me, it took several coats to get to the color I was satisfied with. So these are the 3 pieces you're going to need to make the light. So the reason you're going to use this extra container is because you're going to use it to hold the light bulb in place. You can probably get away without using this extra container, but it's an added step to keep the whole light a little more secure. You can use glue to just glue this lid to the bottom portion there. The reason why I didn't want to do that is because I want to be able to take this string of lights apart at the end of the season, or if a light bulb burns out, I want to be able to take the top off and replace it. Gluing it on there just wasn't going to work for me. It may work for you, but I went ahead and went back to the drawing board and pondered for a long time to try to figure out a way to keep those lights secured to the bottom, and I finally decided on using Velcro. So I grabbed a pack of Velcro from the Dollar Tree. You're only going to need 1 pack. And I cut the strips in half because I needed a skinnier piece. Why? Well, because the thicker the piece you put on there, the harder it is to pull the Coke bottle out of the container, and though that could be a good thing, it's also a bad thing because it'll probably just end up ripping right out of the container. How do I know that, right? Because you can see here I used a big strip and it was very hard to pull out, and I ended up doing exactly that, ripping the Velcro off of the container. Don't throw the Velcro away, just go ahead and just use some hot glue and glue that piece right back down. But from then on, I decided to cut little tiny squares instead of long strips of Velcro. A mistake I made was not cutting all of these Velcro strips all the same size at the same time. So learn from my mistake and make sure you cut it all the same size and at the same time. Also, make sure you're consistent on putting either the rough side inside this container or all of the soft sides inside the container, because if you don't, it's going to make a very hard time matching the tops to the bottom if your Velcro strips are different sizes, and also if you didn't keep it consistent with keeping all of the rough side inside the container and then the soft side on the plastic bottle, or vice versa. Now to create the wire portion of the Christmas lights. You're going to use this tubing, and it's to insulate pipes. The size and price of the insulation tubes vary. They vary from $1.50 on up. The color and self-sealing insulation tubes also vary. I couldn't find any other color but black. If you can find green, this is going to make your life so much easier, because you're going to be able to skip a whole portion of the preparation for these Christmas lights, the preparation of the wire. I went to both Home Depot and Lowe's, and neither of them had any other color but black. The self-sealing tubes are really great too, because you can just pull a sticker and then stick the whole thing back together, like to close the pipe. You're not going to necessarily need to do this, but it's going to be helpful. So if you have the money, then invest in the one that's the self-sealing. The one I got was not self-sealing. Make sure you split the tube open before you start your painting process, because if you don't, when you go to split it open, it's going to chip a lot of the paint off, and then you're going to be going back like I had to do, and you're going to be respray painting to cover up the spots that chipped. The first paint I used was this acrylic paint, and I painted all of the noodles by hand. I wasn't happy because it still kept chipping, so I tried using this Krylon paint, and even with using that, it still chipped. It definitely gave way better coverage, as you can see in these two pictures here. The one on the left is the spray paint, where the one on the right was the acrylic paint. Once you put the Christmas string of lights into the insulation tube, you're going to want to secure the new light in its place, because the weight of it will wobble and we don't want it to move around. If you had the self-sealing tube, you would be able to just pull the sticker, and then you would be able to eliminate the gap there in the tube. And the next thing we're going to make is the plug for the lights. For that little flat part there, we're going to use this activity tray, which I got from the Dollar Tree. You remove any stickers there are on the tray, and then you're going to spray paint it green. The next thing I did was make the prongs for the plug. I used 2 little wooden arrows I got also from the Dollar Tree. The first thing to do would be to remove the string from there, and also the staples that are on the back holding the string in place. The next thing you're going to need to do is get a drill and drill 1 hole on each board near the end. You're going to need to also paint those boards gold, and I noticed when I started putting on coats, it just kept absorbing it, so it's going to need a base coat, and I went ahead and spray painted it silver, and once it was dried, I went ahead and added a few coats of gold. We're going to insert our 2 prongs here. So first you need to place your board there and then trace it, 1 for each side, and then we're going to cut it out. This plastic was pretty thick, so it was kind of hard to cut, and ended up breaking the plastic a little bit, but there was no turning back at this point. And now we're going to go ahead and insert our wooden arrows in there, and the great part about the fact that these are arrows is the end, or the head of the arrow, prevents the entire board from sliding all the way through. And now we have the end of our plug. The prongs did end up being a little wobbly, so I glued the popsicle stick on the end side so that way it would stable it. For the back end of the plug, I used a trash can and then spray painted it to match. And to attach the front of the plug to the back of the plug, I drilled 2 holes on the top of the activity tray and 2 holes on either side of the trash can, and ran some floral wire and then tied it on top to hold it together. To create this twisted wire look, you're going to grab another noodle. This one's just going to be on its own. You're not going to put anything in it. You're just going to attach that by wrapping it around the noodle next to it. And I just used a little bit more floral wire to attach it to each other. Now that you've finished, you can assemble it wherever you would like to display it and enjoy it all season long. If you're enjoying these oversized Christmas decorations, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell if you haven't already, because I am going to be uploading a few more for the season and you're going to want to be notified as soon as I upload those. So to answer the question, does this project cost $25? The answer is no, it doesn't. It costs $173. So the lady on the Hallmark Channel was lying. I don't know why Hallmark allowed that other than to think that maybe they just wanted ratings. So if you're going to make this, just know ahead of time it's going to cost you quite a bit of money. I wish my subscribers a very beautiful Christmas and a Happy New Year. According to the lady on the Hallmark Channel who was promoting this project, she said from start to finish, this project would cost $25. That would include the sodas.